Here's a fun little question. I want you guys to think of your favorite map of all time. If there was one map that you could play for the rest of time and only that map, what map would it be? Well, I'm sure many of you would pick Tranzit. No, I'm kidding. Tranzit? Nobody would pick Tranzit. Tranzit was one of the worst maps of all time. It's so bad it's become a meme in the community. Tranzit's a bad map. And the current rumor, or the main rumor as to why Tranzit was such a bad map, is because it was too ambitious for that generation of consoles. If you remember, Black Ops 2 was the last game to be exclusively released on the Xbox 360 PS3 generation of consoles, so they were really pushing the limits of those systems, and at the time, those consoles were 6-7 years old. They were really getting to the end of their lifespan. And when you think about all the different reasons people don't like Tranzit, there's a few that pop up. Nobody likes the fog, nobody likes the lava, and nobody likes the denizens. The rumor is that these things were incorporated into the map to slow you down, so a player could run from one end of the map to the other, and he moves too quickly. He moves so quickly that the game doesn't have time to load everything in, so it crashes. You can actually see this sometimes when you go into theater mode and move too quickly from one end of the map to the other. The game can't handle it. There isn't enough memory to load in all of the things at once. And this is why things like the fog allowed them to use lower resolution textures and also block your point of view so they don't have to render as far, as well as lava and things like the denizens, so that you're moving from one area to the next, you're also slowed down. You can only move so quickly on the lava, and the denizens specifically stop you in your tracks while you're trying to rip them off your head. So this gave the game time and also freed up memory so that it could load in new parts of the map. That's what was going on with the fog and the denizens and the lava in Tranzit. They weren't there to make the game harder, they were there to make the game work. Without them, Tranzit unfortunately just can't run, especially on those older generation of consoles. If you've ever heard Jason Blundell talk about the development of zombies, it's always a fight for that last bit of memory. They're always pushing the consoles to their max because they don't want to waste space and they don't want to waste memory because those are opportunities to do and try new things. And it's always a game of budgeting when they're trying to work on the limited memory that they have within consoles. And this makes a lot of sense as to why Tranzit became the map that it is. But on Zombroz the other day, we actually were able to get some insight from Jason himself as to why Tranzit was the way it was, and he finally broke a little bit of silence Treyarch has had, because Tranzit was this map that the community hated, but Treyarch was completely silent about it. Well, Jason broke that silence. If you'd like to listen to the full interview, I really do recommend you do. However, the interview is an hour and a half long, so I'm sure most of you didn't listen or sit through the entire interview. It's totally understandable. But what are the beans that Jason spilled on Tranzit? Well, Jason explained that he didn't directly work on Tranzit. He was there and he was present, but he was doing other things, most likely working on the campaign. Meanwhile, Jimmy Zielinski, who I'm sure many of you heard of, was the director of Zombies at the time. He was the one really leading the force, and he was a lot of the spirit and ambition behind that project. And Jason explains that Tranzit was an ambitious game mode. It had a lot of different ideas, and it wanted to push zombies into new places it had never been before. And unfortunately, Tranzit was a little too ambitious for its own good. Tranzit had all these different game modes that they planned. So there's the standard sort of zombies, there were the custom zombies, and there was grief mode. Those were the different game modes that we saw on disc. But there were other game modes that we never saw or heard of, and Jason started to delve into them. He explained that there was one game mode called Chase the Meat, where different meats would appear around the map, and you and another team would have to race to that meat and get there before the other team, but at the same time there's going to be zombies and different parts of the map would be opening up and closing. So this was a pretty interesting idea for a game mode. It's something we've never heard of. I think it'd be actually a lot of fun. The thing is, we actually got some insight into the game modes before Black Ops 2 even came out. Most of you probably have never heard of this, but there was a leak while Black Ops 2 was being developed that gave us the names of all the different game modes. So we had Classic, Survival, and then Grief. Those were the ones that loaded up on disc. And then there was another game mode, Turned. Turned was released within the first DLC, but those were all the different game modes we ever got. Some of the other game modes that were in that leak was a game mode called Race. Race, I'd imagine, is what Jason was describing, where you and another team have to race to a hunk of meat. and then at the same time parts of the map are being closed off. So that may have actually been what that race game mode was like. There was another game mode called Meat. Meat is something we don't really know. There wasn't any description to it. There was another game mode called No Man's Land, which I'd imagine is basically a recreation of No Man's Land from Moon. And then the final game mode we had was Returned, which I guess is a play off of Turned, but this of course was another game mode that got cut. And we never really understood or knew what that game mode was like. There was a second game mode leak that did actually give us insight into one of the game modes, but it's a game mode that we don't know. There's this image right here, and this is supposedly the loading screen for one of the game modes. My suspicion is that this is the loading screen for Meat, because we have one bit of meat being thrown into another half of the map. Supposedly, the way this game mode worked is that the two teams would be separated by a barrier. So if you can see those little arrows, those were supposedly the barriers, and the zombies could run through the barriers, however the players could not. And the zombies would attack the team that is holding the meat. So you'd be throwing it back and forth between the different barriers from one team to another, and the zombies would chase after each other, and the last team standing wins. So it's basically like Grief, except you can only access one half of the map, and you can control where the zombies go by dictating who holds the meat. And this, I assume, is what Meat was, but we never saw it in the game. It was unfortunately never released, but this looks so cool. So you can see its town, but it's been redecorated. It has neon lights everywhere. You can see the meat being thrown across the map. You can see the zombies chasing it and the barrier there. It gives you an idea of what Tranzit and what Black Ops 2 Zombies could have been like, where it wasn't just regular zombies and maybe Grief. It was all these different fun game modes. Look, you even have a scoreboard in the air where I guess the visitors are down a point. Actually, they have -1 point, interestingly enough. This is something that I don't think many people are actually aware of, because this is an old league. This league is coming up on 5 years old now, interestingly enough. But when you take in what Jason said about the different game modes, and then you also take in some of the original leaks that we had, you can kind of see the picture of what Tranzit could have been like. Unfortunately, though, as Black Ops 2's development cycle went on, they wasted too much time on these modes. As Jason said, zombies kind of fell to the wayside a little bit because they put so much emphasis on all these different modes, and while they were cool and fun, they were all sort of a quarter to 3/4 built. They weren't quite finished, and this forced them to waste all their time on these game modes, and then zombies couldn't get the polish it deserved, and these game modes were cut too late in the development cycle, and then they didn't have enough time to really smooth out the rough edges to Tranzit, and that's why Tranzit is this sort of almost incomplete map in a way, where the map functions and the map works and you can play Tranzit like any old Zombies map, but when you play it, it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel as good. It's not polished. You walk into areas, for example, the town, and it's completely barren, and maybe part of the reason town is so barren is because they had all these game modes, like, say, Meat, planned for town, and it just didn't work out like Treyarch had hoped, and this is why Tranzit is the way it is. Jason had a really good analogy. He said it's like sailing a boat while building it, and I think this is a very interesting idea, and he said we only see what's on the shelf. We never actually get insight into what it's like at Treyarch. These are one of the few times where they really pull back the curtain and let us see what is going on in interviews like these, and it's really interesting insight because sure, we all hate Tranzit and we all give the developer for it, but you can see they were really trying to create a new and unique experience for us, and unfortunately, it just didn't pan out. That's going to wrap things up for this video. Hope you found it interesting and enjoyed it. If you did, maybe give it a like, possibly subscribe for more. I'm always making zombies content, and if you enjoyed this, I'm sure you'll enjoy the next video. Have a wonderful day, and bye.